Future Broken Past here. I originally made this video a bit over a year ago. Once I was done with it initially, I struggled with figuring out how to cut it down to a more manageable length to watch. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out the best way to edit it so that it still made sense in a shorter video. So I ultimately put a hold on the project, put it on the shelf, and moved to other videos. However, after taking a look at it again recently, I finally decided just to release it as a long format video instead. I figured that maybe there were some of you out there who enjoy the longer format videos, and I didn't want this effort to go to waste. So, go grab yourself a drink and a snack or two, then sit back and enjoy the video. Now, let's get back to your regularly scheduled program. Hello again everyone, and welcome back to The Broken Past. Today we've got a bit of a fun video. We have a job lot of this, which is clearly way too big to fit on the camera. So let's zoom out here a little bit, because we also have this, and we also have part of one that's left, which even that isn't showing on the camera. There we are. We probably won't get to this one. This one is a bit of a lost cause. I've spent way too much time on it. But that being said, we do have all of these. So I haven't looked at these yet. Bought them off of eBay. We'll open them up and we'll go over what the eBay listing said and see how that compares to these. So let's start with getting these open and get them all set out and see what we have to work with. Oh yeah. So as you can see, we have 4 supposedly busted, not working, not tested original NES systems. This first one here, bought it separate from the other 3. The listing doesn't say too much on this one. It just says console only, 4 parts. I'm not sure if they've tested it or not. And the other 3 are a bit more interesting. These came as a bundle. The eBay listing for this one specifically says, these were units returned to our store by customers stating the console is not working correctly. It could range from blinking power lights to no power at all. These are a bit more of a mystery. I'm curious to see what's wrong with these. Obviously this one is missing the game flip cover, but overall they don't seem too bad. And interestingly enough, this one, which you're not gonna be able to pick up on video, actually has a sticker on it saying it was sold for $69.95. So I don't know if that was sold from this store for that price, missing the door, or what was wrong. So with that said, I think the next step we need to do from here is to plug these into the TV and see exactly what's wrong with these 4 systems. So let's move all this over to the TV and plug it in and give it a shot. All right, now that we've moved over to the TV, let's plug the console into the TV and see what's wrong. Hopefully it's gonna be real easy. Hopefully it's just the connector, but we won't know until we plug it in. Also note, I am plugging it into a large LCD TV, so the video quality is probably not going to be the best, but it should work for what we're trying to do. To start with, this first one is the single system I bought from the seller that didn't really say what was wrong other than it was untested. So we're going to start by plugging in a known Mario Brothers Duck Hunt game that we know works and power it up. Interesting. So this is the same symptoms of my other NES. So this could have to do with dirty pins. That is certainly a possibility. So let's try one more game just for good measure here. Also known working, RBI Baseball from 10 Gen. Let's just see if that does anything different. And nope, again we have a gray screen. Okay, so system number 1 just has the basic full-on gray screen symptoms. The pins seem to work because the CIC lockout chip does detect it and does go solid, but we still get the gray screen. All right, so number 1, gray screen lockout chip works. We will label this system over here. And moving on to number 2. This one is one of the 3 from the other seller that said they were all returned. Again, you probably can't see it, but this one has a sticker on it for $69.95. So let's see what's going on with this one. And again, we're gonna start with Mario. Oh, wow. Okay, well, first of all, there is almost no grip, which you're not gonna be able to see it on here. But this game just goes in and out of the connector like nothing. There's no grip to it at all. So my guess is, unless there's more wrong, at the very least we have to clean and rebend that connector clip. So let's test that out quick. Okay, so we have a non-gray screen, which is good. The fact that it's blue, we're changing colors. Oh, it's still blue. Oh, it is blue and gray. So my guess is it's simply just an issue of those connector pins not grabbing at all. Obviously the lockout chip is kicking in because it can't get a full grasp on those pins, and then the rest of the pins aren't even showing the game. So this is going to be most likely just an issue with those pins. So we'll probably end up starting with this one. All right, and here we go for number 2. Weak connector, we do see colors, but we've got that bad CIC detection on the lockout chip, probably due to the bad connector. So moving on to number 3. Number 3 doesn't look too bad, which I guess you can't really see it. It's really dirty. There's a little bit of, not really rust, not really corrosion, but just a bit of, I don't know, some of the tarnish on these connectors is a bit weak. So maybe that means this is also going to be a cartridge connector. All right, so system number 3, again, working Mario. Same thing, that connector was super weak. Definitely not making a good connection on the game. So this one gives us a white flashing screen, which is interesting. All right, so there we go, out of focus, there we go. Number 3, same thing, weak connector. This one's giving us a white screen and also that CIC chip detection issue. And last but not least, number 4 from that seller. So let's plug this one in, once again, starting with Mario. Well, that one's a little weird. So this one feels a little weird. As the game pushes in, it doesn't actually seem like it goes straight in. It actually puts pressure on the cartridge. So I wonder if they tried using an aftermarket connector, or if they took it apart and put it in wrong. I don't know. Let's just see what it does though. All right, same thing. CIC connection issue. Oh, I saw something. It was interesting. I swore for a moment I saw some display on the screen. Now I'm getting nothing. Yeah, this definitely is not installed right because it's set in there weird. It's possible they also took it out and didn't reinstall the cartridge tray correctly. It was weird. I swore I saw something on the screen. So here we are for number 4. As I said, that connector feels weird. Also getting the gray flashing screen, and I swore I got some garbled data. I'm gonna have to go back and look at the footage and see if there was something on the screen. But, so here's number 4. So let's go back to the desk, and I think I want to start with number 2. This is the one that had that weak feeling connector, the really weak connector. We did see colors on the screen. The CIC wasn't detecting properly, I think because of the weak connector. So let's go back, take this thing apart, see if it was worth the $69.95 that somebody paid, see if we can get this working again. All right, so as I said, we're going to start with number 2, the one with the weak connector that had some colors and then continued to flash the lockout chip, which I'm guessing was just due to the weak connector. So we're going to start by disassembling this. I do have a spare NES 72-pin connector. This is an aftermarket one. I'm going to try to make this one in here work, but I know that this one works, so at the very least we can try it out with this one first. Make sure the system works, and then we can refurbish the connector in here after we're done. So let's start just by taking this thing apart and seeing what it looks like on the inside. So taking these apart is actually really easy. First time is going to be a little bit intimidating, of course, but so we can kind of see here, these are really all the tools that we're going to need. Pencil, again, for later, pick for later, and just a basic Phillips cross-headed screwdriver. So we're going to start by removing the 6 screws on the bottom, 1 on each corner, and then 2 in the middle. And if the system hasn't been tampered with before, these might be tight. Again, you've got 40 years worth of time for these guys to collect dust, dirt, moisture, whatever else is going on in these systems. And note, this one is missing the expansion slot cover. Not a big deal. I can pull one from another system if I want to. The last one's being a bit of a stickler. I think it's out. Yep. It's just, there it goes. So again, take those 6 screws out, flip it over, and then the top should just come right off. Actually not too bad, pretty clean. I've definitely had ones with spiders and bugs and stuff in them, but after 40 years, this one does not look bad at all. Again, we're obviously missing the cover, but that cover is super easy to replace with a different one. So set that off to the side. And now we have the first big section to remove. And this is the RF shield for the whole system. There are, if I can show it on the video, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total screws to remove. And I'm not sure. I do believe these might be different than these. I don't know if they are. They look pretty similar, but I always just kind of keep them apart because I like putting them back in the same spots where they came from. After you remove those 7, this whole shield should just lift right up and off. There we are. Again, not too bad. I've seen some with rust and stuff in here before, so that seems pretty good. And now we've got a couple different sets of screws. Now this one, again, looking like it's a newer model. It's interesting. This one has, I'm not sure how well it'll show. Let's see if we can zoom in and show it a little better here. So do notice that there are 2 different screws. These 2 on this model, these aside here, these are like lighter screws, copper screws, and silver screws, whatever the types of screws are. These bottom ones are going to be, I believe these are the longer ones. I don't remember. One of them is longer. So when you go to put it back together, make sure if your system has these lower screws, and again, some of the older ones don't. They've got holes for them, but there's no screws in there. So if you have these, make sure you put these back in the right spots when you're done. So those are much longer than the other ones. So again, just remembering the longer ones go on the bottom. And I do believe those are the same size as the ones down below, but again, just in case, I like to keep them separate. And lastly, there are 2 more screws that hold the entire board and the shield in place. And they are right here, and one tucked right over here, which you really can't see too much. There it is. Kind of hold the whole RF modulator and everything all in place. So we'll remove those 2. And I may get out the other bit for this one too, because these are also sometimes are torqued down pretty tight. There we are. And so at this point, this entire assembly is going to come out. So before we get any farther, let's go ahead and remove this cartridge tray just to get it out of here. And this whole tray just slides forward and out, leaving the connector in place. So we'll pull that out and just get it out of the way. Again, not too bad. And now from here, sometimes it's easier if we can see it underneath. Kind of. Let's see. There we go. We can kind of see here. There are a few metal tabs that hold this lower shield in place against this expansion slot. So sometimes it might be easiest to simply sort of wiggle it out. Let's go and pull out the second player connector. And then we'll just pull this guy out here. All right. And then that shield comes off. And here we go. Now we have our board and our system. So as we can see, I'll go ahead and just zoom back in here for a second. This is revision 11, NES CPU 11. From here, we can see we have our CPU, our PPU. I actually don't have a version 11, so I don't have these Gold Star SRAM chips. The ones that I have, I'm not sure if they show on here. You can kind of see it. There's actually a smaller set of solder points here as well. So there's actually half-height RAM chips that they used to use. I don't know if these have more RAM, it's just unused or what, but yeah, so all the ones that I have are the smaller sizes. So I could swap this one with my other board, but I think this one's just gonna, again, be the connector. So that's fine from here. So overall, it's a little dusty. The first thing obviously to look at is this main capacitor, which if we look at it here, it is not bulging, which doesn't necessarily mean it's not working, but it's a large 25 volt, 2200 microfarad capacitor, but it looks good. Everything else seems to be working fine. So it all seems to be centered around this connector. So if we look really carefully, it's hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Let's see if I can get it in focus. The pins sit inside of a little plastic tab. Over time, these pins slowly start to sink down into those black plastic connectors, and they don't make good contact. So the easiest thing to do is a couple things. One of the things they recommend is you can boil the connector for a while. That boiling is supposed to release the stress on the metal and cause them to pop back up. I've actually not had a whole lot of luck doing that. The easiest thing that I found is to take something small, like I have a small pick here, and taking this and very carefully bending each of these, let's see, there we go, bending each of these pins up one at a time. so they make contact. But before we bother doing something like that, let's move things out of the way here. Again, we can test this really easy using an aftermarket connector. And again, these work great when you first buy them. They do not last as long as OEM connectors. So rather than just running out and buying one of these, even though they're cheap, they're like $10, it's worth it to try to refurbish this one. So actually we can see here, if it goes into focus, there we are. Those pins on the top they stick up much more than the pins on the other system, on the other cartridge. Again, this is a brand new one. These are gonna make great connections. I don't think we'll ultimately need to use this, but we'll start with testing it. So to remove the cartridge slot is really easy. We don't want to put a lot of stress on the board. I've seen a lot of broken boards from people doing this. I usually literally just take 2 fingers, kind of grab onto the board on the side, and just real gently kind of rock it, and it just pops right out. And we can see the connectors on the board. They're a little dirty. We'll clean those. But I don't think that'll make a difference with this issue. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and take this aftermarket connector and sit it right on. Same thing, kind of grabbing on the sides of the board and rocking it together. And it should go right on. So let's go ahead and pause here and move back to the TV and just see if this is all it needed. Actually, before we do that, I guess we need to plug it in. So the easiest way from here, just to test it, is zoom back out. All I'm going to do is just plug in the power connector. I'm not going to bother with the shields, any of that stuff, because we don't need that just for such a short time running this. And move the cables out of the way and just sit everything back in. And this should be good just for us to test out. So let's move back to the TV and see if that takes care of it. All right, apologies for the shaky camera. I'm not going to bother setting it up on the tripod just to test this real quick. But I have the game installed. Let's just power it up and see what it does. Okay. So we have progress. Reset it. Same thing. If I hold it down a little bit. Nope, so now the CIC lockout chip's not working. Okay, well, that is curious. So I'm just going to suspect that one is actually potentially a bad PPU. Let's try a different game here real quick. Alright, so now we have 10 Gen, or RBI Baseball from 10 Gen installed. Let's try that out. And same thing. So it's able to read the game, the chip is working, but we are getting obviously a bunch of corrupted graphics. That is curious. So let's go back to the bench and we are going to clean the connectors on the board as well as clean the old 72-pin connector and see if that makes a difference. We are going to attempt to both clean the connectors on the board as well as on the connector on the old 72-pin connector itself. So to start with, let's go ahead and clean the connectors on the board. There's a bunch of different ways. A bunch of people have different ideas. I take kind of the lazy route, and that is getting a basic pencil. I have the most luck just having one of the red erasers, a little bit of a soft red eraser, and just go through and very carefully just erase on the connector to help remove some of that, any sort of a tarnishing that's left on there. And same for the back side. And then after that's done, just finish it up with a little bit of IPA. I have some 99% IPA, just to clean off potentially any leftover residue. Which we can see a little bit of stuff coming off. I'm not sure how well it kind of shows on the Q-tip. Right, and now we'll see how well this works on camera. We're going to turn our attention to this connector. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take every one of these pins, and again, very carefully, see if I can do one here and then show the difference. Reach in, get it underneath of the pin, and then just very carefully bend it up towards the top. Yeah, and these are definitely down. They're down so low that they're actually hard to get. So I'm not sure how well that shows. You can kind of see it here from this angle. I've done the first 3, and we can see the reflection in the video. You can't really see once I turn it, but this way we can see those first 3. So basically that's just showing that they are bent up in order to make better connection. So I'm going to go through and do the rest of these 36 connectors. You can see here we're about halfway done. We can see that we've got a lot more connectors showing now as I rotate it that way. It's a bit more tricky getting to the last pins here because you kind of use the pins or the framing beside it as leverage, which you start to obviously lose that leverage the closer you get to the edge. So now if I angle this, it looks like they are all a lot more bent up. There is one. Let's see, right here you can actually see it's not showing quite as well as the other ones. So straighten that out, and now we can see every one of those pins. So with that, after doing that, we still want to clean the pins. So just take a basic toothbrush and some more IPA, and gently, obviously since we just bend up all those pins, just give it a good brush. And now, again, if I can get a good angle, we can see all the pins right there. We can't see the pins on the top. Those are just a lot more difficult to try to get to see. Again, we can see all the pins on the bottom making that connection. So, and same thing again, we're going to reinstall our connector. So let's go reinstall this back into the system and see if it makes a difference. All right, so I got the board reinstalled, the cartridge inserted. Let's see what it does. No, we are still getting the flashing chip. And if I plug the other one in, interesting, I'm still seeing that same. Of course, it's flashing now because again, it's missing some connector, but we are getting the game. However, as you can see, we're still getting a bunch of graphical errors on the game. Well, let's put a pause on this one for a second and go back to the desk. All right, so I've spent a lot of time testing, retesting, cleaning, and I'm still getting that same corrupted video output. So that leads me to suspect that it is potentially a problem with a bad PPU, which again is this guy right here. These things do have a tendency to go bad. I believe there are aftermarket PPUs that you can buy. I'm not sure, so I'm just going to put a hold on this one for now. Set this off to the side, and I want to take a look at another one of the systems. I want to look at the first one that we looked at that had just the gray screen. The CIC chip worked, but the rest of the screen was gray. See if that's going to have a similar problem. So I'm going to set this one off to the side and go grab that one and get that disassembled. So I will be right back with that one disassembled. So I'm going to stop here for a second. This one is interesting. This is actually missing both of these 2 middle screws. So I suspect that potentially the previous owner had attempted to disassemble and fix it. So unfortunately that doesn't lead a lot of confidence, but we'll cross our fingers that we can still get this one working. So let me finish disassembling this one and I'll be right back. Guess I'm going to jump back in here again for a second and say that this one is also missing a bunch of screws. I was able to take out 3, one here, and I think one back here. The other 4 are completely missing. So again, clearly somebody was in here at one point, but we'll keep going. Well, this one is disassembled and gross. So it has all sorts of dead stuff in here, all sorts of, I don't know. This one is clearly pretty dang gross. Looks like it does have an aftermarket connector in it already. I'll show you how we can tell here in just a second. The factory ones, which I have back over here, it's going to be really hard to see, and it's probably not going to show, but there's a really tiny little, it's not going to show, marking on there from the manufacturer of these connectors. So that's on there, and also this thing is milled down flush. Again, it's probably not going to show very well, but these 4 screw holes, 2 on the side, 2 on the side, are milled completely flush, whereas the aftermarket one has, you can kind of see that it's drilled down below, like they milled this after the fact. So this is not a factory one, which means they definitely bought it aftermarket. I'm going to go ahead and put, I'm actually going to move this whole thing out of the way, because again, this is gross. And we're going to swap it with the previous shell that we were just using. So we're going to put that into here, and we're going to take my known working one and put it on here. There is a small, there's lots of potential issues with this board. This board is pretty bad. They didn't trim the lockout chips, so they haven't gotten that far. It's a possibility that there are some broken traces down here with all this grossness that's on the board. But let's just plug in a known working connector wired up in this other case and go check it out. All right, so I have the second board, the gross board that was in the gross shell, brought out here, attached to the good shell with a known working game. And let's power it on, see what it does. Hey, look at that. That looks good. Let's try another game. So now we're going to try it again with RBA Baseball. And that one works as well. Okay, so this one is most definitely that bad aftermarket connector, which we could kind of expect. So I think I'm going to give that connector a good cleaning, and we will reattach it to this board and see if that makes a difference. So I will clean that connector, attach it, and be right back. All right, so I have cleaned and reinstalled the original connector that came with this system. Bent the pins back, I used some IPA to clean them out, and let's see if this works now. If you remember before, we just had a gray screen. The CIC lockout stuff worked, but we had no display. So let's try it now. And that looks good. So this one is working. Let's try it real quick with another game, just to make sure. And now I have RBI Baseball installed. Plug it in. And same thing. Looks like this is working. So I do believe this system is good. Now again, I am currently using this board in the other case with the other cabling and everything else. I don't think that's going to make a difference. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely disassemble the rest of the other board, which really all I need to do. It's not too bad. There's 2 screws in there, and this whole power reset assembly comes out. And there's also 2 screws on the bottom of the controller piece here to allow me to remove that and then slide the 2 controller ports out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this entire board, as well as clean that entire shell over there, the gross one, and then look to reassemble it all back together, and we'll see where we're at. So I will go get that cleaned, and I will be right back. Alright, so it's been about 12 hours since I cleaned everything. I got the lower shield installed, got everything put back in the original case with the original cartridge connector. So let's turn it on and see if it still works. And it looks like it does. So that's good news. So despite the bug infestation, this one looks like it's back in working condition again. So let's head back to the bench and get the rest of it put back together. Alright, so from here, reassembly is pretty easy. I'm going to start by get rid of the cartridge, since we obviously don't need that anymore. Alright, so the first thing we need to do before we install any screws into the motherboard is we need to make sure we install the cartridge game tray back in its place. I'm not sure how well it's going to show, but there's a small little lip here that actually goes underneath of the board. So I'll just start by sliding it in place. And sometimes it is a little bit tight if you use these aftermarket cartridge connectors, like that came with this one. Just gently apply some pressure and it should go into place. And then again, just making sure that you push down before you slide it back so that lip bites underneath the board. And then the whole thing just kind of falls into place. So again, we're going to start. I'm going to use our long screws. Remember, the long screws are on the bottom of the top 2 screw holes. And this one didn't have any screws on the top 2. Whether it came that way from the factory or whether the seller or whoever last got into the system did not properly put them back in the right spots, who knows. But that's fine. This at least allows us to have support in all 4 corners of the cartridge tray. And then our 2 screws for the RF module. And making sure that that still works. We can go ahead and install the top shield. And I'm not sure how it's going to show again, but there's these little plastic tabs, a few of them in place around here. And those go into some of the smaller holes in the shield. It helps to kind of line everything up because the shield has a tendency to want to bow back out. And so these kind of help hold it into place. So you can put in our screws. And again, we would normally have 7, but this system has 4. So that's fine, I guess it'll work. So again, obviously it's a little loose with missing the screws, but it'll still work for this. So from here, all that's left is to install the top shell. Again, installing the shell is pretty easy. It's simply to sit it on, make sure it's lined up with the corners. You can hold it in place, flip it over, and then install the remaining screws into the bottom of the shell. And that's it. So at this point, we've already tested that it works, but let's go give it one more test, as well as testing the 2 controller ports, just to make sure, because I did clean those as well when I cleaned the rest of the system. So let's plug it in back at the TV and make sure the rest of it all works. All right, so we're back over here. The system's plugged in, the game's inserted. Now you might be wondering, I'm not sure how well you can see on there. Let's see if we can zoom in for a second. That I do not have the game pressed in. Normally when you can put the game in and you can press it down. So after you bend all the pins back in place so it makes a good connection, you don't actually need to press it down. And even if you don't have to, it's even better because it actually will extend the life of the pins. Not having the constant pressing of the game down and constantly bending the pins will actually extend the life, and hopefully you won't have to do this again for a number of years. I've got it installed. I'm just going to leave the game up. You can see that the door still closes, so that's perfectly fine. So let's turn it on, make sure it still works, and let's test out both controller ports. So there we go, we can see the system is still working. Let's try out our first controller port here. We'll do 2 players so we can test out both controllers. So this one is clearly working. Go ahead and just make sure and speed run it while we're at it. Oh, I want to get caught on the stairs. And here we are with the second controller. Same thing, it looks like it works well. I didn't test all the D-pad, but I'm pretty sure at this point that it's working. So, and also that is really blown out on the camera. That's all right though. Cool. So there we go. So far, we have one system working. Just a dirty connector or bent pins, and obviously super dirty on the inside. The other one, bent pins, but it seems to be working. It's just that I think the PPU is bad on it. So we're still gonna keep that one off to the side. This one is done. I'm gonna grab one of the other ones. We'll disassemble it, and I'm gonna guess it's gonna be the pins as well. So I won't make you watch the disassembly process for that, but we will get it disassembled, take a look at the pins, and go from there. All right, so I went back and I did watch the video testing all 4 of these systems, and I did see that this actually was displaying an image, even just for a fraction of a second. as we were testing out the cartridge. So I'm not sure again how well this is going to show on here. Let's see, maybe if I hold it up, this will help. But if you can tell, when you put in the cartridge, it actually, I think I can tell, yeah. So it doesn't actually go in all the way. It kind of starts pushing it down. And if I look on the very bottom, you can actually see the whole thing lift out a little bit. So I do think they put the connector in correctly, the right orientation, but I don't think they put in that whole game tray, as we said before, underneath the motherboard. So that's why this is all loose. So it doesn't even want to come out very well because of it. So I think this may just be maybe cleaning that connector as well as reseating the cartridge tray correctly. So I'm not going to bother you with watching me take this apart. I'm just going to go ahead and get this disassembled and get down to that point, and we'll be right back. Now, after taking that last one apart and seeing how disgusting it was inside, I should probably have gloves on for this one. If you're looking back at that last one, I'm pretty sure that was cockroach remnants, droppings and so forth in there. Fortunately, they were all dead, but something to keep in mind, I guess, when you buy used, untested systems online. But I'm going to hope that our luck isn't that bad for 2 systems in a row. So let's see what we have to work with. Okay, so the inside of this one's not too bad. Everything seems to be screwed down nicely. We do actually have all of our screws, which is good. So go ahead and finish disassembling, and I'll be back again. And here we go. And I can already tell, just by looking at this after removing those screws, that, as you can see, there is plenty of play. They did not properly install the tray underneath the board. Whether or not that would cause the issue we saw, I don't think so. But let's go ahead and finish getting it out anyway, just to take a look. And I do see, it's not terrible, but there are, it's probably not going to show up the greatest on there. There are some pins that are down a little ways on that board. So I'm going to see if we can get away with just pulling the cartridge connector, leaving everything else installed, and just clean this connector. So again, this is another aftermarket connector, and again, it's hard to show, but we can see if it focuses, these are not flush with the rest of the plastic molding, and it's missing the icon of the company that makes these. And you can also tell, and this is probably the easier way to tell here, focus. Just these pins don't have, looks like sort of a copper coating on them versus these, I don't know, tin coating or something that just doesn't have the best overall longevity with it. But that's okay. I think we're going to try just to clean this and rebend those pins and see if that's all we need to do. So with a little bit of IPA and our toothbrush, go ahead and clean the pins first. And then just like before, one at a time, go through here and lift all of these pins back up. Let me show it. You can kind of see here up to about here. They've been bent back up. And I'm going to guess that's it. So without even having removed any of the cable connectors in here, we'll see if we have to clean the pins on the board. We might do that, but I'm curious if all we need to do just to get it back up and working is just replacing or fixing the pins on that connector. And they didn't install this board correctly at one point, so there is a bent plastic piece in there, but that's fine. Let's move this over to the TV and test it out. Okay, well, rather than moving the camera over the TV just to test it out, I just went ahead and did it myself real quick to see. And unfortunately, it didn't solve the problem. I did get a glimmer of some imagery on the screen, but then I got back to the gray screen again. So I'm gonna guess maybe at this point, it is the connectors on the board that need cleaning. So we're gonna go ahead at this point, and we're already most of the way disassembled. We're gonna finish getting the rest of it apart. And let's go ahead and take the connector back off. Let's take a look at these pins. They don't look too bad. They are very dirty. So, ooh, there's some corrosion on the PPU. That's not good. You can kind of see that right here. There is a little bit of corrosion there on the top and kind of on the sides down onto the board. I don't think it's leaking from the capacitor. It's entirely possible that it was water damage, maybe from the bottom. The pins seem okay, but that may not be helping our problem. Let's get a little bit of IPA here. Get rid of that and take a look to see what we have to work with. Oh, we got a little bit too over here on the CPU. Again, the pins seem okay. Well, the pins seem okay, and the traces, I think, seem okay. So, let's use our pencil trick again. And scrub on it with a little bit of IPA, so we can get anything else off. And then from here, let's reinstall the connector one more time, and then let's see if that takes care of the problem. All right, so I've done a lot of fiddling with this one, and here's where we are at with this console. As we can see, it boots right up. Seems to work great. However, this is not using the connector that came with the system. Obviously not the original one, but also not the one that came with it when I bought it. This is that one, which is probably going to be super out of focus. I don't know. There's clearly an issue with this one. I've cleaned the pins a couple different times. I had one last round of cleaning it, so we'll test it out one more time and see if it takes care of the problem. But I was getting a bunch of different colors. Clearly there are some pins that are loose. So I went ahead and put in my aftermarket one that I had. Clearly that seems to work. It works with all sorts of games. Mario Brothers, RBI Baseball, all this seems to work great. However, the other connector, again, is not working. So there are some issues with the connector that came with this system. So I'm going to go ahead and close it up, call this one fixed. Then we'll move on to the fourth and final system. All right, and here we are on to our last one, number 4. Well, I guess number 3 when we were testing them, but the last one that we're going to look at today. This one had a really weak connector. There was almost no grip on the cartridge when it was in the system. So it gave us the white screen and that lockout chip detection issue as well. So I'm going to guess this is going to be the same as the other 3, where it's just going to be a connector issue with those bent pins. I believe all 3 of these from this seller all had aftermarket connectors. So I'm going to guess this one probably is also going to have one. The question is whether or not we'll be able to make it work or not, since the one from the other system, the other aftermarket one, I could not get to work. So I'm not expecting this one to work in this system. So hopefully this one, we can bend the pins back and get this one back up and running, or I will have to buy another, unfortunately, aftermarket connector to try to get this one back up and running. So I will go ahead and get this disassembled, and we'll be right back. Again, crossing our fingers for no bugs. Well, I wouldn't say bugs, but we've got something in here. A bunch of dust. I believe that means this one is going to be a gloves repair. All right, now that we're all gloved up, we can continue. And so I can tell at this point that connector does appear to be original. I can see that goldish copper, whatever coating on it. So that should be good news. We should be able to just bend that back in place and hopefully keep this one working. All right, moment of truth. How bad does this look under the board? No, it's not too bad. It looks quite a bit dusty. So it doesn't seem too bad in here. There's, you kind of see it, there's some stuff, some dust bunnies and something down there. So I'm going to clean that out when we're ready. But I don't think we need to deal with that yet. If we turn our attention to the board, again, we've got a whole bunch of dust bunnies up here too on the voltage regulator. But otherwise, I mean, it needs a really good cleaning. We will definitely want to get that cleaned off. But let's take the cartridge connector out here. And the pins themselves seem to be in pretty good shape. Again, maybe a little dirty, but not too bad. And again, with the connector on here, as we can see, if I bring it up here, this is, and again, it's not going to show, there is a really tiny little printing on here from the original manufacturer. So this is original. You can also see, if it shows, you can kind of see it in the light, this top part up here, there's sort of this alternating sort of a plastic imprint on there. Is another indicator that this is the OEM connector. So again, we're going to follow the same steps as before. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just go ahead and clean it out here first again. And then once again, go through with our pick and lift up every one of those pins. All right, and here we are with all of the pins lifted again. So let's go ahead and reinstall it back on the board, at least temporarily, and see if that takes care of it. So I'm going to go move this to the TV and we'll test this one out. All right, so real quick, I cleaned out the case. I also scrubbed off all the dirt and dust and stuff off the board. And now it's time to test it out and see if the connector works. So we're going to start with Mario Brothers. Nope, we had something. Looks like it starts, but our chip detector is a bit finicky. Okay, so it does work. It does load. Clearly I had to wiggle the connector a little bit to make it work. Let's see how sensitive it is. Yeah, okay. So let's try baseball. Interesting, so that one starts up just fine. No issues at all. Let's see if it's sensitive enough if I touch it too. Yeah, so that also breaks the connection. It is able to at least start on its own. But again, if you can imagine this in the cartridge tray, you push it in and you can push it down. That's obviously causing that to have issues. So let's go back to Mario one more time. The same thing. It's interesting in the game, if the game's pushed all the way in, we get oh, actually that time we got something. But it's much more sensitive compared to baseball. Okay, so the cartridge connector does work. However, as we can see, it's not working as well as I would like it to work. So I think what we're going to do for this one is we are going to try the boil trick. Since it is the original connector, I'm comfortable with doing the boil trick to try to salvage this connector. So we're going to move upstairs into my kitchen and do exactly what it sounds like. We are going to boil this connector for about 30 minutes. And if we're lucky, that will hopefully loosen up and realign the pins. So we'll have a better connection when we come back down here. As well as potentially maybe cleaning off some leftover grime and stuff on those connectors that I couldn't get with a simple toothbrush. Let's go upstairs and give it a boil and see if that solves the problem. So I boiled the connector, installed it back in the system, and just like before, it wasn't working. So since then, I've spent a little bit of time kind of going back and forth, cleaning the connectors, trying to rebend the pins, still nothing. So interestingly enough, it's getting a bit confusing at this point, but I put the old connector from the other system that never worked, that I replaced with my new aftermarket connector. I put that one into this system, and now here's what we get. So I just installed Mario, turned it on, and it works perfect. It's a bit finicky. If I start kind of shaking the system around, it seems like it stops working. But of course you're not going to do that when the cartridge is in the system. But I mean, it seems to work every time. So let's try another game. Let's try baseball again. And again, it works just fine. So let's try one more game, because now I'm curious, and I'm also confused as to why this is now working. Let's try Ninja Turtles. Same thing. It works perfect. So now I'm a bit confused as to why the other cartridge didn't work. I think I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to put the original cartridge, or the original connector that came in the system, back in. I'm going to put a lot of IPA on one of these games and just see if I can clean it out that way, since I don't have a cartridge slot cleaner. I just see if that works. All right, let's see if that fixed this connector. If not, I guess we're going to use the old bad but now good connector. Yep, same thing. If you finagle it just a little bit, it does work, which it might be okay with the cartridge tray and stuff installed, but usually these seem like they work fine outside of there. So it's just a bit too finicky for my liking. I guess we're going to install the old cartridge connector back into this one, keep this OEM one, I guess, for something else, and put it all back together. So let's do that and wrap up this video. All right, so just to verify, I got it all put back together. I just want to test out this last system with the old connector from the old system that it never worked with, and just make sure it's still working. So Mario works. That is a good sign. Let's test out baseball too, make sure that's still working. Okay. Well, it's not perfect, but baseball does work. All right, let's go for 3 and see if Ninja Turtles works as well. Okay, so Ninja Turtles does work as well. Clearly this connector doesn't work as well as the original one, but it's at least working with this system. I did notice something weird with, which I guess we can't see very well because I got bad lighting, with this one where it doesn't fit well on the motherboard. It seems to bind when installing it, so I don't know if this is bad or what. I'm obviously going to keep it and see if I need it at a different time, but for now, we'll use this aftermarket one with this system, and it seems to be working. So now it's time to wrap up the video. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this video. Out of the 4 systems that we worked on today, all 4 had issues with that connector, and we managed to get 3 out of the 4 working when it was all said and done. And the only one we didn't get working is this one here, which I'm pretty sure is due to one of the SRAM chips on the board. Looking online and seeing some of the symptoms that other people have had, it appears that it's probably the VRAM chip on this board, and I don't have any spares of that, so for now this system's going to have to sit partially working. Now the other system that I talked about at the beginning of the video is this one here. And I worked on this one quite a bit before even starting this video, and I'm pretty sure I've narrowed down the problem on this board to also an SRAM chip. But I'm pretty sure on this system I've tracked it down to being an issue with the WRAM chip. Just based on the symptoms I'm seeing, plugging it in, just getting a gray screen regardless of messing with the connectors, doing any of that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure at this point it's likely the WRAM chip. But all that said, I think it's pretty safe to say that if you wanted to tackle trying to fix an NES system yourself, go online, go on eBay, try to find one that's listed as for parts or not working. I know the one that I use as my main NES actually was listed as doesn't even power on. I bought it, got it home, plugged it in, it seems to work just fine. And the rest of these, they were all listed as also not tested. I know for the seller that I bought 3 of them from, the listing said that they were all returned back from users, just not working right. I guess they didn't test them beyond that. So again, out of the 6 total systems I've bought, 5 of them were an issue with a bad connector pin. One of them has a bad VRAM chip, the other one likely has a bad WRAM chip. So at this point, I think it's safe to say that probably most systems listed on eBay as for parts not working most likely are just due to the user not testing them beforehand. Out of the 6 systems I bought, I got 4 of them fully working, 1 of them mostly working, likely again with a bad VRAM chip. The other one is kind of the wild card with all of them that I've bought, but I'm pretty sure I've narrowed this one down to just the WRAM chip like I mentioned. So if you're interested in buying a system either to add to your collection or tinker with trying to repair, I definitely wouldn't hesitate on just hopping on eBay and buying one for parts. So that said, if you'd like to see a part 2 to this video where I try to tackle fixing this system, likely replacing the VRAM chip, and even also trying to replace the WRAM chip that I suspect is the problem in this system, let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, let me know where I can actually get some of those SRAM chips. I know I can buy replacement parts online, but I'm not entirely sure which part number is compatible with which of these types of boards. So if you've got that information, please leave it in the comments and let me know so I can get the parts ordered so I can make a part 2 and try to get these last 2 systems working. So thanks so much for following along with me today on the process of getting these systems fixed. I had a lot of fun getting them back up and working. I'm glad I was able to get these systems fixed today and keep them from ultimately ending up in a landfill where they didn't need to belong. And I'm looking forward to being able to give away these systems to families who will enjoy them for years to come. So thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.